Welcome back to the Worry-Free Retirement. Tony Walker here. And as we watch this market go up and down as we record this show on April 8th, 2025, I thought it would be interesting to bring in two young lads to the Worry-Free Retirement Studios. To my left, Mr. Wes Walker, fellow fiduciary, and of course to his left, my favorite son-in-law, Trey Juergens, another fiduciary here. So good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. So I guess we got to start off with these phone calls that we get. I mean, we have over 3,500 clients. 2,800 accounts now, I think, with Schwab roughly. So you all take a lot of those calls. So again, yesterday, let's take April 7th, for example, the market was down heavily. Wes, how do you handle some of these calls from clients, and what are our clients saying or asking about when they make these calls to us?
Sure. Well, I think that's a lot of the value that we add. You know, we're able to respond to people when they do have concerns about the stock market. I think once they get to talking to us, they realize in most cases how little they have in stocks if they're in retirement to begin with. So the typical conversation kind of breaks down like this. We'll go over their total assets with us, their total liquid net worth, and then try to figure out what percentage of that is in the stock market. Talked to a gentleman yesterday, has roughly $800,000 in liquid assets, but turns out that he only has 8% of his liquid net worth in stocks. Now, of course, he's watching the stock market fall, but even if he was to suffer a 50% drawdown, it's only a 4% loss of his total net worth. So I think categorizing it in those terms is very helpful.
Yeah, and we were just talking about that yesterday, Trey. I think you always like to refer to when people call in and they're a little nervous and they forget that we don't usually have all their money in the market. You refer to that pie concept. Explain the pie concept and kind of dovetail on what Wes was talking about.
Yeah, same thing. It's really just how much of your assets are exposed to equities. Equities being stocks or funds made up of stocks. So when you look at annuities, savings in the bank, things like that have no equity exposure, and you really kind of back into how much market exposure they have. They're used to seeing the S&P and the Dow. They're down so much. What's going on? All this red at the bottom of the TV screen. With us, in reality, very minimal equity exposure really exists.
And speak to that person out there, and we'll start with you, Trey, because we're getting a lot of this. People want to roll their 401ks over to Tony Walker Financial. And again, by the time this show airs, this will be aired during Derby week. I mean, the market could be up or down, who knows? But what would you say to those people who call in and say, hey, I'm ready to move over. I've met with Tony. I love your game plan, but the market's down now. Should I move over that 401k now or wait?
You can never time the market. I think the only thing better than catching lightning in a bottle is just getting a plan in place. And when you have a plan and you have a way to see that you don't have to take all that risk and you can still pull off how much income you need in retirement, that's really all savers are looking for.
Yeah, we had a gentleman come in yesterday and we had already presented the plan. He came back in to discuss it and he said, well, I don't know if I wanted to do this, but to be honest, I don't know if I want to do it now. His account, his 401k had dropped, I think it was around $100,000. I grabbed the plan back out. We looked at some of the variables we had, and we hadn't even put all the money on the plan. We do things like this intentionally. I said, sir, we have $300,000 that we had stockpiled to the side. We're not even on the plan. You could still retire. And he was very relieved over that. So another thing, Wes, you and I talk about this too. Let's speak to the fact that, yeah, the market's down, but if somebody's really thinking about retirement, really if we go back roughly a year, I don't know exactly the time frame, but if you go back a year, even though the market's gone up, has anybody really lost money compared to where they might have been a year ago? You kind of see where I'm going with that logic.
It's possible, yeah, that they might be down slightly, but they're not down in any sort of grandiose terms, not down 10% or 20% from last year. They're probably about flat roughly at the time of this recording from where they would have been. And then something that's interesting too, I mean, with interest rates being higher, there are some safer alternatives out there. So people, a couple of years ago when interest rates were low, you were kind of forced into equities. You had to take risks because there was no place to get yield out there. But now that interest rates are up, there are safer alternatives. I know a little bit divergent from your point, but that is a fact that's going on now.
Yeah, let's speak to that. And one of the things we love around here, because we haven't been able to sell them for years and it's becoming a great tool for us, for those people that are just saying, hey, get some of this money out of the market. Speak to the fact of a MYGA. What is a MYGA and how do we utilize that product?
Yeah, absolutely. So a MYGA is a fixed annuity. It pays a guaranteed interest rate each year. You can choose to have that interest paid out to you or retained inside the contract. It functions similar to a CD at the bank. You just get simple interest each year, and a 5-year MYGA at the time of this recording is around 5.5%. Those rates can change, but that's pretty good for not having really any risk at all.
Yeah, and unlike bonds, there's no downside risk with interest rates. Plus, it kind of hurts us. We just get a small commission paid by the company. So it doesn't come out of your pockets, folks, if you do a MYGA. But also, we don't have to charge fees on that money. So if you had $200,000, and let's say our average fee is 1%, that's $2,000 a year they're saving, assuming they keep the MYGA to its maturity. So, and then finally, Trey, and then let's see if you can Derek, once you get the split IRA concept and pull that up when you get a chance. There it is. Trey, speak to this a little bit, because I know a lot of times I'll meet with people. They agree to move forward. We call it the down the hall. I take them down the hall to see you. And talk about this split IRA concept that we created years ago. How has this been a game changer for us and also for our clients who might want a little bit of stock market exposure, but the ability to see these buckets and understand when they can take money out?
Yeah, so with our game plans, this little graphic kind of in an elementary way puts in exactly what we're doing for them. There's a lot more behind this, but to understand that they can take their 401k, IRAs that they've rolled over previous plans and put it into this split IRA concept. It gives them access and liquidity with that Schwab, but also mailbox money on the back end. So having that ability, knowing they're not going to run out of money, having that liquid access with minimal fees on the front end, pulling a 401k that may have had upwards of 70% in the market and putting it in this that may, like Wes said, sometimes you're 10, 20 or less percent in the market overall. You take a lot of risk off the table and you have a plan in place.
Yeah, I know a gentleman came in yesterday, he and his wife, and I think they're going to move forward, but it was a complicated plan. You had different Social Security. There were WEP provisions that they weren't familiar with. And then I showed them this. We had multiple annuities. I mean, it was more complicated than this, but I went back to this and I said, we're going to handle all the details behind the scenes. A lot of advisors are trying to emulate this. A lot of them can sell the same products. But the process we have in place, folks like you, all of our staff to implement this, that's where the game changer is. And it allows us to keep their money safe at the same time.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed that video. If you'd like, check out these other clips. And be sure to hit that like button and that subscribe button for more videos.